Yeah, absolutely. We have a very deep pool of AI expertise in Scotland. For example, the University of Edinburgh has the highest number of students enrolled in studying AI in the UK. So we're not only an international leader in areas like machine learning and natural language processing, but Scotland's also home to a large number of innovative research projects that are focused on bringing AI expertise and data-driven innovations to public and industry partnerships that are designed to serve the common good in areas like healthcare, transportation, education, finance, the environment. So, for example, I'm currently chairing the Scottish Government's Data Delivery Group, which is tasked with determining how to use data-driven tools like AI to improve the quality and the reach of public services to citizens of Scotland. So the idea that AI needs to be used primarily in ways that citizens can not only see and trust, but in ways that deliver real, tangible benefits to everybody, I think that's where Scotland has the opportunity to lead. So we have the technical expertise that we need in order to actually make these systems capable of delivering on the promises that we hear every day about how AI will transform our lives and our businesses and our institutions. But that is a lot of really hard work that has to be done. It's not magic. You don't flip a switch with AI and immediately have everything run smoothly and more safely and effectively. There's a lot of work and expertise, both technical and social and kind of moral expertise, that goes into building these systems into our lives in ways that are trustworthy, safe, reliable, fair. And I think Scotland can really lead in this area. We can demonstrate how to build trustworthy AI platforms that merge technical strength, which we have, with kind of practical moral wisdom about how to use these tools in ways that actually improve the lives of citizens everywhere. This is such an important issue, and organizations like the Royal Society of Edinburgh have a big role to play in citizen education and convening thoughtful, informed debates around AI. Unfortunately, in the media, there are a lot of popular myths and misconceptions about what AI is. So we need to talk about the reality of AI and not the fictions. For example, it's really important to understand that AI systems don't have anything like human intelligence. They aren't machine minds. They are really powerful mathematical tools for solving certain kinds of problems with a whole lot of data. The AI tools that we have today are fundamentally systems for taking large pools of data and doing kinds of computations with those data that human minds would simply find too time-consuming or cognitively demanding to do ourselves. But that's all these systems are today. They aren't aware, they don't have emotions, they don't even understand the real-world significance of the data that they process, which is essentially just kind of mathematical symbols being computed in very powerful ways. So we don't need to worry about AI taking over from humanity. We don't need to worry about the Terminator scenario, at least not with the kind of AI that we have today. And the kinds of AI that get talked about in the media as if they will be competitors with human intelligence, those are still entirely fictional scenarios. It isn't like we take the AI that we have today and then we just make it run a little faster and it turns into that. That's a fantasy, right? We would have to design very different kinds of AI systems in order to build anything comparable to human intelligence. And frankly, I don't think we need to do that. I think what we need to do is figure out how to use the kinds of AI we have developed in ways that are actually trustworthy and responsible and safety, deliver on their potential. So we have another kind of myth, I think, that we need to make sure doesn't carry over into the public debate in ways that actually produce misinformation. So one myth is, okay, AI is, these are machine minds that compete with our intelligence. The other myth is that, well, if AI really is just fancy math, then we don't need to worry about AI because its results will always be objective and its results will always be neutral and fair and accurate because you can't argue with math, right? So you hear this argument a lot. But the problem is that's not understanding the kind of math that AI is built on, which first of all is, broadly speaking, in most AI contexts, it's statistical, meaning it's involving probabilities generated from large quantities of data. And as we know, statistics doesn't guarantee particular outcomes to be correct. It makes predictions that are broadly over large numbers reliable if we've done our work right. But there's always some uncertainty in statistics. And so that translates into AI as well. So it means that in many contexts, the kinds of predictions or classifications that we get from AI systems cannot be considered to have the kind of certainty that we get from arithmetic, right, or multiplication, or forms of mathematics that give you only one answer and only that answer can be the right one. So in addition to that, we know that AI systems rely upon generally large quantities of human-generated data. And humans are not objective, and humans are not always fair, and humans are not always making the right classifications or predictions. So when we feed human-generated data into these systems, we are feeding these systems in many cases the same mistakes and errors that we ourselves are subject to, which means that these systems cannot be described as inherently objective or inherently neutral. They ingest and have baked into them a great deal of uncertainty as well as potential human bias. And that can be very easily reflected in or even amplified in the results that the AI system puts out. So even the best performing machine learning systems get things wrong sometimes, which means that we have to get much better at understanding their strengths and their limitations. And that means that the public debate around AI has to be focused around the right things. It has to be focused on the actual risks and dangers, not the speculative or theoretical or fictional ones. And it has to be focused on the real opportunities, what AI really can deliver, and not some of the false promises that people just trying to make a quick buck off of the name AI might be putting out there. So that's why this is such an important civic education and communication issue. And that's something that AI experts and people who are acting on behalf of the scientific and technical community have to get much better at communicating with the public about what AI is in ways that can offset some of these myths and misconceptions that circulate so easily in the media. So we need the people who build and understand AI tools, who work every day with them, to be able to empower Scottish citizens to participate in debate about their use that's grounded in these realities. And that can move the conversation and the debate forward in constructive ways, rather than remaining in a speculative exercise that never goes anywhere because it's not grounded in anything real or anything that we can actually take action to address. Exactly. And we're not saying that it's racist only in the sense that, the outputs aren't racially neutral. The effects of structural racism in society are very real, and they do affect what goes into the system and what it's able to calculate. So the racism is in fact a real part of these unfair outcomes, But the racism is not generated by the system. The racism is generated by us and reflected in and ingested by these systems. So we really have to think about how, in a sense, we're teaching these systems what the world is like with the data that we feed it. And if we view the world through racist or sexist or ableist or classist lenses, then the data that we feed the machines teaches, in a sense, and I use that in a very loose sense. It's not like teaching children with minds, right? You're teaching a mathematical model. But still, you're teaching that mathematical model the vision of the distorted vision of the world that you are bringing to it, that we are bringing to it. And we know that we all have biases, some of which we're aware of and some of which we're not. So part of the task, and there's a whole body of research called machine learning fairness, or fairness in machine learning, that's really about using technical expertise in machine learning to kind of ferret out those biases in the data and in the algorithms and learn how to prevent them from producing unfair outcomes. That would be the case if we do nothing about it, right? If we have no human oversight of these systems, if we go into our AI strategy with a kind of ethical blinders on, then we are risking these kinds of outcomes. But the good news is we don't have to do that, and we're not doing that. So two things that I think are really important. One is the community of machine learning researchers are now very aware of this danger and working in many parts of the machine learning research community, working very hard to address it. So for example, my own work at the University of Edinburgh is around the ethics of data and artificial intelligence. And through a gift from the Baillie Gifford investment firm, we are funding this year 5 PhD studentships that will work on different projects across the university having to do with ethics of data and AI. And many of these projects are drawing on the expertise of people, for example, in our informatics departments who have the technical expertise to figure out, for example, how to address the problems of fairness in systems that are being used to make decisions about creditworthiness, for example, in the financial sector. So thinking about what it would mean to have fair and ethical decisions in that context is something that people are actively researching and developing new and better techniques to address. There's no silver bullet. There's no easy fix for these things, but we are getting much, much better at detecting fairness problems in these algorithms, and we are getting better at designing ways to mitigate that. However, it's not just a technical problem, it's also a social problem that we have. And so we need not just machine learning researchers, but we need social scientists, we need people in the humanities, we need ordinary citizens, we need advocates for the vulnerable in society, the people who often suffer most from these kinds of social unfairness and bias. We need them to be pulled into the debate and helping to develop the kinds of human wisdom that wraps around AI and makes sure that AI doesn't end up amplifying the unfairness in our society, as opposed to helping us actually build a fairer world, which is something within our power, and AI is one of the tools we can use in that effort. Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think both things are true. That is, I think the fact that humans exist in different cultural environments with different, usually not radically different values, but often different rankings or priorities of the values they have. So in certain cultures, for example, social harmony is valued more than individual privacy. Doesn't mean that personal privacy has no value. It just means that social harmony might be prioritized, where in other cultures you may see the reverse priority. And there's no getting around the fact that that will produce some conflicts and some challenges. when we're talking about sort of international standards for AI development. But it also presents some opportunities to make sure, for example, that when we think about what good or trustworthy AI systems would be, that we aren't looking through too narrow a lens, right? Going back to the point that we all have our blind spots, right? It's important for us to look at how other communities and other cultures see their relationship with AI tools developing and what values they want to guide those developments, because that can make the conversation more critically rich and thoughtful. But I think it's important to remember that AI is not just one thing. So sometimes we talk about AI, right, as if we're talking about a natural kind or an entity that exists in a single form, right? There are as many types of AI and examples of AI as there are human problems to solve in particular places. So that means that regulation of AI, for example, can't really be a universal one-size-fits-all solution anyway. So you're not going to get a single set of rules that are going to be sufficient to guarantee worldwide that AI is always used in ethical and trustworthy ways. So it's almost impossible to regulate AI effectively if you don't first specify what kind of AI tool you're talking about, what it's being used to do, where it's being used, and under what conditions. Because only then do you really know what specific risks you need to manage and what kinds of harms you need to protect against and what rights or opportunities you need to protect with regulation or any other form of government oversight. So the reason I mention that is it means that we need to have this conversation kind of on the international level. But it's also true that individual countries will still have a lot of power to determine how AI is used in their communities, how AI is used in their healthcare systems, which might have different needs than someone else's healthcare system, or how it's used in their transportation networks, or in the delivery of other goods and services. So there's areas where international cooperation and debate is needed, of course, especially when we think about how to use AI to address global threats like pandemics or climate change. And you see that conversation happening around the COVID-19 context right now. How should we use AI to manage the threat of COVID-19, and what standards around privacy and human rights should govern that effort? So we do need to have those conversations, but it's true that oversight of AI needs to happen at the national and regional level as well. And that's the only way that we will get the kind of fine-grained tuning of AI with sort of local human needs and vulnerabilities that we really want. We want AI to serve people, and people are not the same everywhere and not in the same circumstances everywhere. So I think we need to be able to have that kind of adaptability and flexibility. Well, I think one of the most, well, of course, I'm an ethicist, right? So I have a certain bias, but I do think that one of the most exciting and innovative aspects of Scotland's AI strategy is the inclusion of ethics as one of the core pillars of the approach, alongside regulation and policy. And I think in a lot of efforts, you have seen people sort of treat ethics as if it can just be kind of folded into compliance with GDPR or compliance with human rights law, and not thinking about ethics as a kind of more distinct form of aligning AI with human interests. And I'm really excited to see ethics really framed in the scoping document for Scotland's AI strategy as its own goal and sort of standard for success. So, the scoping document talks a lot, and it's available on the public website, so anyone can go look at it. In fact, the government is taking commentary and public responses to that scoping document until early May. They've extended the date of the public consultation as a result of the COVID pandemic. So there's still an opportunity for people to kind of come to this document and offer their own thoughts about it. But the document already identifies the flourishing of the Scottish people and Scottish organizations as the goal. And flourishing is an ethical concept. I use that a lot in my work. It's a translation, actually, of a Greek concept of well-being or kind of social happiness that really sets the bar higher than just making sure that AI is used in ways that are legally permissible and guided by sound public policy. So I'm really excited to see that. I'm also very gratified by the emphasis that the government is placing in the document, as I've mentioned already, on transparency and public consultation, rather than just relying on sort of top-down decision-making by experts. Even when well-intended, it's easy for experts to miss the ways that risks and benefits of AI can be distributed unevenly in society. A lot of times we see, I used to work in Silicon Valley and see this all the time, but you see this really anywhere where you have a group of people with the same kind of expertise. They often come from relatively similar backgrounds. They might have similar educational privileges or economic privileges, and they've been often educated and socialized in the same kinds of environments together. And that can lead to kind of groupthink and blind spots, and really inability to understand how very different kinds of individuals and communities may experience technology differently. Right. A lot of the people who designed the technologies we're relying on today are from social groups that don't have as much to fear, for example, from technology being used against them by governments that might be trying to oppress them on the basis of religion, or oppress them on the basis of gender or sexual orientation or skin color, right? Or who might be more economically disadvantaged by technologies of a certain sort, where other people may in fact be gaining economic power from those same technologies. So it's really important, because even with the best intentions, right, we don't always see how the decisions we're making are going to affect people unlike ourselves. It's very important that all citizen stakeholders in Scotland are included in the deliberation about this AI strategy as it takes shape. And that will help to make sure that the AI strategy is really designed for the Scottish people, rather than just meeting the goals of a few. And I think that is something that you already see baked into the framing of the AI strategy effort. And I think that's something that you don't always see in these kinds of national efforts, and it's something that makes me very excited to be a part of it. Yeah. This is a really important issue, something I've been thinking about a lot the last few weeks. And I think one of the things that's really important to remember, so first and foremost, yes, AI tools and other data-driven innovations, not necessarily ones that fall into the category of AI, but these kinds of tools absolutely can accelerate and amplify our public health efforts in response to the pandemic. In a multitude of ways, from hotspot detection or even prediction, to contact tracing, to patient risk assessment, to figuring out which kinds of treatments might be most effective for which populations. And I predict that we will see that until we have a vaccine, it may not be the case that the same treatment regimen works equally well for all patients. We're seeing a lot of variance in how this virus is expressed in different age groups, in different, and yet sometimes very different outcomes in the same age group or the same demographic. So there's a lot of work being done on trying to unpack the correlations between, for example, our individual genetic makeup and the way it plays out and how the virus is expressed, as well as what kinds of treatments we might benefit from at different stages of infection. And I'm really excited about AI's potential to speed up some of those discoveries. That being said, a lot of these efforts, especially the ones that involve a dimension of public surveillance, right, or gathering of information about sensitive personal data, a lot of these carry with them risks of unintended harm or abuse. And for me, I think the most important thing to remember is that public health efforts are something that depend heavily on public trust and cooperation for their effectiveness. So think about the advice that the UK government has been giving about social distancing, right? There aren't enough police in the United Kingdom to physically separate every two people by 2 meters, right? If people don't voluntarily observe these guidelines, they will not help control the spread of the virus. You absolutely need people's buy-in. You need people to look at these recommendations and say, yes, I want to help. So public trust and the ability to listen to and observe public health advice is vital. Now, we've talked already about some of the misconceptions and myths around AI that can make the public fearful about AI. And we've also talked about some of the actual real risks connected with AI that people do rightfully need to be concerned about. And surveillance is another category, and sensitivity of health data is another category that people already, before COVID-19, had reasonable anxieties about. How is the government using my data? Who could have access to it? What happens if there's a breach? What protections are there that it's only going to be used to benefit us and not to undermine our ability to get a loan or get a job. So we already had a lot of worry from the public around these tools and around the use of their sensitive data. Now we come into a context, you add COVID-19, and now the need for public cooperation has risen by several orders of magnitude, right? And yet you want to use these tools that carry some of these associations of risk and potential for abuse. You want to bring these tools into the effort. Well, that means that you have to, from the government side, work extremely hard to demonstrate how those tools are going to be used in trustworthy and safe ways. So you can't just say, trust us. We'll use these, in ways that are beneficial. Trust us. We'll use these in ways that respect your privacy. You have to tell people how you're going to do that. And you have to establish mechanisms of transparency and accountability so that the public feels like they can count on those promises being kept. Because especially in a pandemic context, right? Even if these promises are sincere, which I think they generally are, it's very possible for mistakes to be made or oversights to happen so that those promised protections don't actually get carried forward into action. So you need, as a government, to say, we need the people to come along with us in this effort, and we need to earn their trust that we will use these even more powerful tools in ways that will keep them safe, not just from the virus, but also from abuse by bad actors or misuse. And so how are we going to do that? How are we going to build these oversight and accountability mechanisms around these efforts? So that's what I think is really important. We absolutely need to think about what will work. For example, it's unclear whether using AI for surveillance of people's movements so that you can reconstruct previous contacts of the infected. It's actually not clear whether the efforts to do that will be very successful. We're seeing a lot of apps get developed, many with some really good privacy design features incorporated in them. But one of the problems is, as we learn more about the asymptomatic spread of the virus, it may be harder to figure out what kinds of interactions count as a contact that would need to be reported. And so I think we need to be very evidence-driven and use AI not indiscriminately, but in ways that when we really look at it, we expect that it will deliver reliable information. And then we need to have this sort of wrapper of human oversight and accountability that people can trust.